Okay, who doesn't love chocobos? Well, apparently Word doesn't, but I do. Out of all the Final Fantasy staples like Moogles or Black Mages or people named Sid, this one is my favorite. Just a disclaimer, it's gonna be a while before we talk about Farm Boy, cause, I gotta unravel the whole chocobo thing first. Chocobos are large, mostly flightless birds that can be domesticated and serve as mounts. They first appeared in Final Fantasy II. This is also where we hear the first chocobo theme. Now, isn't that a nice tune? But as many fans will notice, there's something missing. The second part of the song only appears in Final Fantasy III. And from this point on, all the Final Fantasy games feature a chocobo theme. The core melody remains the same, but Uematsu changes it up by going through different genres, like a mambo in 5. Or a techno version in 6. There's also this version in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which might simultaneously be the greatest and worst thing I've ever heard. In 7, there are at least 5 different chocobo themes, and we will go through them all in the course of this series. You'll notice that I said at least 5, and that's because I'm still not quite sure if Farm Boy is a chocobo track or not. But before we come to that, let's recap. So, we finished up our business in Calm, talked about Sephiroth, and decided to follow him. We come to a large field with a large swamp, which contains a large snake, or serpent, I don't really know the difference. The only way we can safely cross the swamp is by either defeating this creature known as Midgar Zolom, or by riding a chocobo, which is fast enough to outpace the snake. So we visit the Chocobo Ranch, and this is where we hear Farm Boy. It's a simple song with instruments that instantly remind me of a typical all-American farm or ranch, especially with the banjo serving as the instrument for the main melody. Now, here comes the part that's been giving me a headache. Is this a chocobo theme or not? Well, the answer is yes, I think, but it's very different. I think this is the closest part. By the way, I'm going to use the chocobo theme from Final Fantasy III as a comparison here, since it's basically the first complete version of the melody. It's chocobo theme prime, if you will. So, you can definitely hear it. There are many similarities in the other parts of the track as well, but I think these are by far the most obvious. By now, we all know a little bit about how Uematsu writes music, and not using hints of the chocobo theme in this track would have been very much out of character for him. As for the song itself, I think it's very nice. Not much more to say about this one. It's nice and simple, and it fits. As we approach the chocobos out in the field, they do a little dance for us. And we get the first real incarnation of the chocobo theme in this game. This is a waltz, obviously, as you can see from the name, and also from the notes. A waltz has several very typical signs. We really only need the first 4 bars to confirm this. It's written in triple meter, most often 3/4. It usually sounds 1 chord per measure. And often the root of the chord is played on the first beat, the upper notes on the second and third beats. It's a waltz. Can't get much waltzier than this. I think it's kinda neat that we get introduced to the Chocobos in such a playful way. There's been very little silliness so far, except for the whole cross-dressing and honeybee manor business. And as opposed to that affair, this is actually child-friendly. If you just look at certain aspects of the Final Fantasy universe, things like Chocobos or Moogles, it's really no wonder that Kingdom Hearts happened. This is called surf music. It's a type of music that came about in the US in the late 50s and early 60s. I would call it a sort of transition stage between rock and roll and garage rock. It usually featured fast-paced guitars with a lot of reverb, an organ or electric piano, and a very specific rhythm. This kind of rhythm. This is one of my favorite Chocobo themes, certainly my favorite in this game, though nothing will ever top the ukulele version in 9. The music plays when we initiate a battle with the Chocobo, which is how you catch them in this game. You have to equip a Chocobo lure materia, walk around on Chocobo tracks, feed the Chocobo greens to distract it during the battle, and kill all the other enemies. Sounds complicated? Don't get me started on breeding them. Anyway, I think it's pretty cool that all the different Chocobo aspects of the game get different music, instead of just one all-purpose kind of theme. Apart from the main part of the song, which is of course just the Chocobo theme in a surf rock version, there is also a kind of bridge. I really like this part as well. It starts off simple and then gets pretty chaotic in a fun way. That's basically a recurring theme throughout these Chocobo tracks. They're just a lot of fun. This is also the music that plays during the snowboard sequence and minigame in the Gold Saucer, which is appropriate because snowboarding is kinda like surfing, right? Surfing on snow? I'm only guessing here, I've never done either, sorry. One final thing I like is how there are little Chocobo sound effects in this song. It just seems like Uematsu was having a lot of fun with these different Chocobo tracks. This is probably the most important Chocobo theme in this game, since it's the one we hear when we ride a Chocobo on the world map. So, which genre does Uematsu choose? The answer is jazz. This track is probably one of the most overtly influenced tracks that Uematsu has ever written. You know what, I'm not gonna even comment or show you notes or anything, just listen. The rhythm and the chords are extremely similar. To be fair though, Uematsu is very open about this. Musically, I like how the theme is sort of jazzified by using jazz harmonies and binding the melody to the rhythm section. The walking bass line is a nice touch as well. We can also hear this track in the Chocobo Sage's house. I like how this track is very mellow and fun. As I said, this is the case for most of the Chocobo themes, because in Final Fantasy, being on a Chocobo means that you can't be attacked by random enemies, or in this case giant serpents, and so the music is much more playful and less tense. I guess that's just the overall theme of this episode. Joyful, lighthearted, and just generally fun music. And that was it for part 11. Thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for part 12.